Hi, welcome again. So today we are going to learn about what is a table and the constraints. So before we understand the constraint, let's understand the basic structure of a table and the constraints. So let's first talk about what is a table. So I hope you have used Excel. If not, you must have used some table format where you have rows and column, 2D. So you see some information, maybe you see the weather report, or maybe you see some other information in a tabular format. You must have seen somewhere. So that information is represented in rows and columns. Now, suppose we have to store the data in a same way. So the retrieval happens in the same way. Now, so table is nothing but, SQL table is nothing but, it's a combination of rows and columns. It's an entity which store the data into the table and column format. Now, what is a row? Row basically represent a set of nodes, each column beside each column. So we are going to see it. I hope you have seen Excel. If not, it's fine. We are going to see it. Now, let's see the syntax. Now you might be thinking, where is the table actually is being used? So we have not created any database. So definitely we can only create a table inside a database. So first, inside we have to connect to a SQL server. Once we connect, we have to create the database. After creating the database, we can create tables. So I hope you understood, the parent-child relationships, what is needed before we create a table. So if you've not seen the previous videos about the data types, please go back and go to the previous link and then make sure that you see the data types. Without that, it's not good to jump into the create table. Okay, so let's get started. I'll start with the document and let's see first creating database in SQL Server. Okay, so here, if you can see, it is very simple. What is a database? So database is basically storing the data into many different files, like how we have folders. Generally, if you use operating system, any operating system, it has a folders. It has a many files inside the folders. So we call that folder, we understand that as a folder, right? In the same way, database is also like a folder where it store many tables. And table store the data. So it just storing the way. It's a format which store the data. Okay. So let's see. So the syntax of creating the table is very similar. It can be done two ways, using the language which SQL Server understand. Second, by using the wizard help. What is wizard? We will go through that. First, let's see, where do we write? So the syntax says create database name. So where do we write these commands? How do we talk to SQL Server? So in our previous videos, we have seen that we connect to this SQL Server. Okay. Then there is an option here, new query window, right? So either I can click on this button. If somehow this button is not available on your screen, then you can use Control+N. Okay. Now, second option, you can say file, new, and file. That also you can do. Third option, you can say right click and you can say new query. So there are many ways to open a new query window. Okay. So let me click on that. So I clicked on it. Okay. Now, when I click a new query window, you see here, it is set to master. What is master? We have already seen our previous videos. There are 4 system databases: master, model, MSDB, TempDB, So let's see, if we have to create our own database, is it the right database to fire those queries? Yes, we can write. Okay, so let's I'm going to go to the blog. You can refer these blogs on our website, Learn Super Easy. Okay, so let me increase the size. How I'm increasing? I'm pressing the control button and I'm, rolling over my mouse up and down. So you can see while pressing the control, holding the control key and moving this mouse ball around. Okay, and then you can see it's zooming in, zooming out. Okay. So it's the simplest technique. There are many ways to do that. Okay, anyway. So here, create database and then database name. So I would like to give our company name. So let's say Beta Cloud Infotech. We can keep underscore, but let me see. Yeah, I don't want to give for now. Okay, so let's say create database Beta Cloud. Okay. So I'm going to select that for now, and I'm going to click execute button. What is this execute button does is, whatever commands we want to communicate to the SQL server, it actually take our commands and make a request to the SQL server that we want to say something, we want to perform some action. So it's a execute is nothing but it's a channel. It's kind of a trigger. It's a button. When we click, it's tried to reach our our message to the server that something this particular clients want. Right now we are a client. Server takes the request, serve it, and return it back. Okay. Now I'm going to click on execute button. The moment I click the execute button, let me do a little note here. So you understand this as a SQL command. Okay, what is it is? It is a SQL command. We can call it SQL script or we can call it a script. What is a script? A script is something when some text is written in a proper syntax format, that is called a script, which the server understands. Those we call it a script. Okay. Now, when we hit the execute button, this particular command goes to the server for executing as a script. In return, SQL server gives this command to the SQL engine. What is a SQL engine? We'll understand. That's a theoretical part. What is a SQL engine and how it works? You don't need to know that, but it's good that at least you should know there is a SQL engine. You drive a car and definitely there is an engine in the car, right? Then only car functions. In the same way, SQL Server also has a SQL engine where it performs many operations using with the help of SQL engine. So storage is one thing, it stores the data, but performing and driving through syntax and command, it also needs few arrangements, okay? It's one of the thing is SQL engine. Now, when we hit the execute button, our command goes to the SQL server and it executes this particular execute in the sense it tried to convey our message to the server, and SQL server says, oh, this command is used for creating a database. Then SQL server perform that activity on the machine where SQL server is installed. Maybe it's in somewhere in the US, wherever it is. So it performed that. Once it is performed, we should be able to see this under these particular category. What are these? If you see, these are nothing but databases. If you see, this is the database folder. So you can see once we create a database, we should see this with the name of Beta Cloud. We should see it here. Once it is successfully performed in the SQL server. Okay, so let's try. Okay. Let me clear all the drawing. Okay, now I'm going to click on execute button. Done. If there is an error, I should have got here in the red color saying that some problem. Right now we are lucky, so no problem. Now you might thinking where it is, Vijay? I don't see it. Okay, so for that you need to refresh it. Okay, So many of my students get that doubt. I run it, but I don't see it. So actually, it's a cached version. What you see in Object Explorer, if you don't see the Object Explorer, you can always go to the view and click on the Object Explorer. You can also do F8 if that window is not appearing for you. Okay, so now I'm going to refresh it. Okay, let's see. Okay, so do you see the beta cloud? Yes, we can see it. Okay, so now we can see our database. Okay, beta cloud. Let me go inside. Right now, when I click on expand button, I see many folders. Database diagram, tables, views. Let's see inside the table. So it's empty. We have not created any table so far. Okay. Now, if we have to create a tables, so what are the syntax? We will know. We will learn. Okay, so let me go back to the database. So you've seen one of the ways creating a database using the syntax. Okay, what is the other way? The other way is just, you can see the other way is if you right click on the database folder, there is an option called new database. Then it will ask you give the name. This is using the wizard. And then you click OK, and then same thing will happen. Okay, you see, same thing will happen. You can try it. Then how do we know how many databases we have? So we can run one SQL query to see how many databases our server holds. Even we can see that in Object Explorer, but using this query, we can see. And you know how to run a query using the command. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you the same thing. Right click on the database and you can see new database. Here you can put whatever, demo DB, and you can hit OK. Before we hit OK, let's also see here something important information here. Whenever we create a database, there are two types of files get created. One is primary, which we call raw data. Basically, this is the file which stores the data. The other file is log, the log file. What's the extension of the log file? One is LDF, one is MDF, another is LDF. Master data file and log data file. So where actually the data gets stored in MDF, which is demo DB. The log file is just a log. Now you must be thinking why there are two. So one database holds two things. So we also have two types of memory. One is secondary memory, one is primary memory, right? Somebody said something, we process. Once things done, we won't remember that thing, that will be gone. So we keep that. Somebody says us something, somebody asks us to do something, and once that work is done, we don't care what that person said, and what we don't need to remember that. In the same way, logs also, database log file also maintain the log entry. Log means something has to be done that will be remain until that work is done. Suppose you wanted to load some data, you wanted to insert some data, that holds for some time, for few seconds, maybe for few hours. If it is a big data, it holds for few hours. In that case, it needs a space where it will get created. So it will hold that into the log files, all those transactions, and it will do its own. It takes its time and it's do and perform its own. Okay. So we'll also see these files. Let's create this, and then I'm going to copy it so that I can show you. I copied this. Let me show it. Oh, yeah, let me copy it. Okay, so that I copied. I generally use shortcuts. Okay, so now I'm going to click on Okay, we can add more primary groups, but that I will teach you in different part of the video, maybe later. Okay, that's not important right now. I'm going to hit OK. The moment I hit OK, you see, it immediately refresh also. When we create using the script, it did not, but when we use using the wizard, it knows that we are performing some action. So it has to refresh its own. Okay, now let me show you. I use Windows R and then I put Control V, which is a paste. Okay, it asks me for the permissions. I'm an admin of the system, so I can. Okay, so you can see demo DB, right? Do you see? One is MDF, one is LDF, right? You can see. One is master data file, one is log data file. Okay, so now we know there are two types of files get created. It's an interview question. Okay. Now we have understood the database. There are two ways of creating the database. Now let's understand the table. Thank you. Hi, welcome again. So now we have learned about the databases, servers, executing any command. Now let's understand what is a table and how to create it. Theoretical part we just understood in the previous video. In this video, let's understand, quickly jump into the syntax. So I hope you remember I said table is nothing but a combination of rows and columns. That this is the way it is stored the data. This is the way we can retrieve the data. Now, what is a row and what is a column? Let's understand that format in a technically. So let's see. Okay. Now let's see. Basically, data. Basically, a table. How to store data in a table. Basically, that's what I wanted to say. So we have seen already creating a database. Now that's the syntax of a table. I'm going to copy this and then I'll explain you in query window. Okay. So I hope you can see my screen. Now, here the syntax goes with very simple way. First, let me try with a small set of columns. Okay, so you can see here we can use using create table name. Now create table is you can see it's coming in the blue color. So SQL Server identifies some of the keywords its own. It finds those words its own dictionary. There is a SQL dictionary. Who has written? The person who designed SQL Server, they have written. So now, whatever we see in the blue color, it means, or maybe in a different color, it's a part of the SQL keyword. Always remember, whatever you don't see it in the color, whatever is the normal black color, it is what we have written. And the syntax goes create table name. So here we can give anything. You can give your name, library, school, whatever you wanted to create. Create table employee. Then open bracket. Okay. After that, how many columns we are intended to have in our table? Suppose we wanted to store the employee information. How many entities, how many information you wanted to store for your employee? Let's say employee ID. That's very much important, right? Okay. And then name. So name, generally people will refer first name and last name. Why? Because for many purposes, we store name into different columns. Whenever we need employee full name, we can club both of them and we can represent in the reports or anywhere. It's not a problem. Okay. Now also let's see email. So it's a good candidate to store the employee information. Then age. What's the age? City. It's a good, right? So let's say these kind of information you want to store. Now, I was waiting for this just to say this is where our columns comes. So these are our columns of a table. Now we have learned data types. I hope you remember that videos. If you're not seen, please go to the previous videos and see those in our playlist with the name of data types. Okay, so you can see here with the name, after giving the name of the column, we have given the data types. This is int. We will also understand what it is this. Right now, do not worry about it. Let me take it out. Let me remove it, so you don't need to worry. What else? So this employee ID is nothing but an integer type. Okay, perfect. First name, the name of the person is nothing but a string, a characters, alphabets. So it has to be varchar. I hope you remember our data types, right? So now what is this 50? So 50 is nothing but we think that any one person's name should come under within the 50 characters. So we assume and we can give that. Definitely it can be more than that, but we can give 50. In the same way, last name. Email ID, we think 100 will be enough. 100 means we are giving here a size. What is our expectation of a data length in the future for that particular column in a table? Based on that, we decide size of the data types. So giving the data type is one thing. Deciding the length, deciding the size of the data type is the another thing. So you can't give 2 and say email ID, right? Right? Generally people will keep their first name, last name, their date of birth or something. And then they say @gmail.com, right? So generally it goes 50 to 60, 30 to 40, depends on the person. Okay. Now age. So age is the person's age. We can also calculate this by using the date of birth. So it's a number. You cannot be in a character, right? It's a number. City, it's a string. It's a character. So we are defining city as a varchar 50. I hope you understood. Now, let me execute this. Before I execute this, I need to make sure under which database I wanted to keep this. So many guys manage their gallery, photos gallery. They have a birthday, anniversary, travel, church, something, right? They create folders, and whenever they go to the specific zone or they click pictures of something specific, mostly girls do that. So they move those photos under that category, that folder, right? In the same way, we have to make sure that where we are creating the table, for which particular database we are creating the table. So right now, we are creating this table for our newly created database in our this session DemoDB. Okay, so now there are two ways to select. There are two ways to select a database before we hit execute button. One is using the command. The command goes use demo db and then use go. Go is nothing but differentiating one command from another command, so that there is no mix up in two sets of command. Okay, so once before I will run this will get run, and you can see here instead of the master it will set the demo db here. The another way of doing that is going to the drop down. This is the database drop down, and we can select here, this one. We can select demo db by clicking here like that. We can also, let me go change it back and then show you. You see it has set demo db here. Okay, now, okay, how to minimize and maximize the window, what you see in the result window, using the Control R. Okay. Now, my database is set. I want to create this table. So let's create this table. Done. I select the table syntax and done. Now, where do I find that table? So where I created that table in DemoDB, and then where I can find it under DemoDB. It's very simple. So let's go and try to find our table. Let's go to the DemoDB. Let's go to the tables. And then let's see here. Oh, here it is. Okay. So let's see. If I right click, what are the options I see here? Yeah, before I right click, let me go inside the tables. So let me, I see many different columns, many different options, folders. First thing is columns. Let's see the columns. Oh, here it's the same way which I created here. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Now we have seen what is a table. Now we will also see how a table can store the data. What is the way to inserting the data? Let's see that. Okay. So let's follow our blog and then we will see. So here there is another way of communicating. So here there is a syntax. If you want your table to insert the data using the set of commands, you have to follow this syntax. The syntax is very simple. It's a simple plain English. Insert into employees, employee ID, basically column names in the bracket, first name, last name, email, age, city. Once you're done with the list of columns, you put the end bracket and then you say values. Values means now you wanted to supply the values. You have mentioned the table name, you have mentioned the columns. Now you wanted to supply the table values to those columns. Let's do that. I select it and then I copy it. I come back here, come back to my query window. Let me minimize a little bit so you can see it. We'll zoom out. Okay. So now I hope you can see the syntax. Insert into table name, open bracket, all the columns with separating with comma. Now values. Whatever the first value I have written before the comma, that belongs to this. No, let me make it more simple. Whatever I have written here, this belongs to this. Whatever I have written in the second position, that belongs to this. Same goes to the third. Same goes to the fourth position of the column, fifth positioning of the column, sixth positioning of the city. Suppose I wanted to first provide the city and then age, then do it. You can reverse it. In the same way, it will take the value. Whatever you define here, the positioning of inserting the values defined there. The way you define your list of columns, when you supply, you have to supply in the same positioning. Means whatever positioning you have decided, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, many of my students ask me, do I need to follow the same way the table has created, or I can follow anything? If you remember, we have created this way. It's the sequencing. Employee ID, first name, last name, email, age, and city. That's our sequence. But do we have a privilege to rearrange and supply the way we want it? So let's try it out. We can do, yes. So let me first insert that row. This is the way of inserting the data. How simple it is. I just execute and it inserted, done, committed. The one difference between the Microsoft and Oracle is, in Oracle, you have to say one more command, say commit. So in Microsoft default, they have done all the transaction as, they have set a different isolation level. They have different transactions. So that's a more technical, I know, but that's a big difference actually between the Microsoft and the other databases. Microsoft is much more friendly database to learn and play with and learn and practice, and it's make everything easy. Okay. Now, my second thing, right? What I was referring, can we change this, the ordering? So I wanted to do employee ID at the end. Yes. Then I have to change the ordering also. Before email, I wanted to insert the edge. Can I do? Yes. So I also have to rearrange. I'm just changing the value, so you will have a little difference between, John and James. Okay. I'm going to perform this again. Make sure if you are wanted to run a specific command, you select and then run it. If you do not select and just hit execute button, it try to execute all the commands which you mention in this particular SQL query window. So make sure you select using the mouse the specific command which you want to execute, and you can hit the execute button. Okay. You see, now I made it 2 entries. Basically, I inserted 2 entries. How do I see that data? Okay, so let's see that data. What is the way of seeing the data? First, let's see a normal, easy way. Right click on a table and say, select top 100. Here, we don't need to write anything. We are just dependent on options which SQL Server is giving us for seeing the data. Let's see. I right click and say select top 100. You see, it is retrieving us the data the way we inserted. Good. Now, what else do you notice here? Here it mentions using how do we retrieve the data. That is what we are learning in this. Retrieving the data, it's also part of the SQL query. We can say select list of columns from the table name. And this is how it goes. All the columns, the way we want to see it. It's not that you have to provide the same order. It's up to you. After the from, there are 3 things you can see here. So how do you refer your house? First, you refer which country you are in, then which state you are in, which city you are in, which street you are in, what is your house number of your colony or whatever, So this is how the address goes. In the same way, in the database also, it says which database out of all, okay, which schema. So this is a basically database schema. So what is a schema? We will understand that into some another videos. That's not important right now. Okay. So after the schema, just remember this as a your colony name or your street name, but it is not, street name is not a specific physical house or a physical home of someone. It's just a logical name to that particular path. In the same way, it's a logical name. Database schema or the logical naming is given to the specific houses, specific tables. Now, this is our table name. Now, why we have given these 3 things to reach out to the employees? Tomorrow, when you wanted to run your tables among all the server levels, irrespective of any databases, so all these databases, whatever you see here, these are available under one server. So if your query at the server level, it doesn't matter which database you are running, what database is selected by default, it doesn't matter. It will automatically reach out to the specific database, specific schema, and specific tables. Okay. Let me show. You see, this is the way we can retrieve the data. Okay, let's also see. Now you have seen here, we are mentioning all the columns the way we want it. Suppose I only wanted to see three columns. Then I can also say I'm only interested to see three informations, three columns. Then SQL Server is able to give you those information which is required for your query, which you requested. It's not going to give you everything if you don't need it. So whatever you need it, we have to tell what are the informations of that table we need it. Okay. Now suppose we don't know. Who remembers all the column names? Who remembers it? Nobody does. In the real time, you might deal with a table which has 90 columns. I've seen 250, 400. I've seen that in my 13 years. It's a big tables. They need those columns. I'll tell you in some other session maybe why we need that. But suppose you wanted to retrieve all the information without knowing the column name. How you can do that? So SQL Server says, if you use the star, the asterisk, then it means you wanted to retrieve all the columns from a table. So I'm going to paste that from the block and select star from employees. I'm going to hit execute. One more thing before, if you don't want to go again and again on the execute button using your mouse, you can just simply say Control E. Generally, I use Control E lot, but I wanted to show you that I'm clicking on this button in this video, so I have to go there. Okay, now you can see here, it returns the same results. What I was writing here, 5 columns and asterisk. So asterisk is nothing but, people will also call it a star, asterisk, with the different names. It's nothing but, it means all the columns in the table. Can you remember that? All the columns in the table. Okay, done. So now we have seen all the columns in the table. We will also see how to modify the table. Alter is nothing but modifying the table, which we will learn in the next video. So now I think that's it for table creation, inserting the data, retrieving the data. We will learn 3 things. Okay, so now in the next video, let's understand the constraints. What are the constraints? We will learn. Hi, welcome again to this session. In this session, we will learn about constraints, SQL constraints. Now, what is constraints? So basically, constraints are nothing but rules which we have to follow if we want to insert the data. We want our table to store the data, but we want to set some rules. What are those rules? How we can set some rules? How we can validate the data before we allow them to store in our table? Suppose you wanted to set some rules. So these things are nothing but, in SQL Server it calls constraints. So let's see the theoretical part and the practical part. So we have covered all the important things which you need to know as part of your interviews, as part of your SQL learning. So let's see. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so let's see. So these types of constraints are available. I hope you can see it. Many constraints. What are the important constraints which you will be using on a daily basis, in the sense whenever you create a tables? So there are most common use constraint and there are rare use constraints. Okay, but we need to know all. At least we need to have an idea. So let's understand the first rule and the first constraint. It says not null. It means, suppose you are capturing your customer information, and you can't allow a customer without having its social security number. Maybe you're doing some business which is important for government authority to store the data before you allow that person in your business. Now, it may be a social security number, or it may be another, it may be email address. Maybe email address nowadays is mandatory. Phone numbers are mandatory before you register and sign up for something. So where this constraint get applied? So this constraint get applied on the column inside the table which you define for the table. Definitely, who store the data? Table. In the table, who actually store the data? Row. In row, which actual part holding the specific value? The column. So if you have to set some rule, where do we set it? On the column level, not on the table level. Okay. So not null is nothing but values cannot be null. Just now I gave the example of social security number. Suppose you wanted to enroll for election, for giving votes for election. Now, definitely it's required to have a vote. Okay. So this information cannot be blank, cannot leave empty. We will not accept your data in database if you're not going to provide this information. We are going to reject it. We are going to set some rules that we won't be allowing you if you're not giving us this information. This is what constraint. So now we understood not null. Let's understand second, unique. Once you registered using one email ID, the same website, or maybe Facebook, Amazon, you must have tried, Insta, the same website will not allow the another account with the same email ID. It will say it exists. So sometimes you need information, but you don't need a duplicate information. Maybe user forgot and he's trying to re-register. He forgot that he already signed up. Or maybe you wanted to, it may be unique, you can say email IDs, social security numbers, phone numbers, So once something is in, you are not going to take those entries again in your table. Sometimes you need these kind of rules. This we call unique constraints. How do we apply? Just after when you define table, column, data types, and then, after the data types, you can define the constraint. That's it. This is how it will set. Third, it's very important, primary key. So the primary key is very much frequently used whenever you create a table. EF code says the Dr. EF code, the person who invented the database. So the primary key is a combination of both above, not null and unique. So a key which is a unique and not null. You can't leave it blank, and you cannot insert the duplicate. I hope you remember, you listen it again if you're not. A primary key is nothing but which is a unique and not null. It's a combination of both. So your question may be, then can we insert null into a unique constraint? If we define a unique, yes, one time null will be allowed. Null itself is also a unique once. Yes, it is. Why not? But once, if null is coming second time, what is a null basically? Null is nothing but when we are leaving things empty, we don't want to supply. How database treat null is equivalent to empty, you can see. You can understand. If nothing, it means there is a null. If there is no supply of a value, it means there is a null. Null means nullifying. There is nothing. Okay. So I hope you understood primary key. Primary key means which is used to uniquely identifying a row. Means for a specific row, generally we refer, you must have heard employee ID, your Amazon ID, your Prime ID, your Netflix IDs, your account number, These are, once it is given to you, it will not be given to anyone else in the world. Your bank account, once it is given to one person, the same bank account will not be given to anyone in the world, even after 50 years, 100 years, it will not. Because it will create another confusion. You don't want to transfer your balance to someone else, right? Okay. Okay, so the fourth, foreign key. The name itself, it's saying foreign key. So suppose you wanted to store the information in many different tables. Let's say you have 3 phone numbers. Definitely we can't store all the 3 phone numbers into the employee tables where we have employee information. Either we need 3 columns, phone number 1, phone number 2, phone number 3. Or we can have another table with the name employee phone. But how do we connect one table with another tables? So suppose employee ID is a unique, we know it's a primary key, right? So in the phone table, employee phone table, there we can refer, we can copy the same employee ID and say, okay, for this employee there are 3 rows, same phone number repetitively, 1 to 3, 3 rows will get inserted into that table. So we are referring employee ID from employee table and copying and referring and inserting into employee phone table. When we have this kind of relationship, what that value becomes? That value is a foreign. It's coming from the foreign. It's coming from the employee table to employee phone tables. So that particular value is a foreigner here. It's a foreign value. It's not its own. First, the parent. Once the parent is there, then only child will come. So it's a parent-child relationship from one table to another table. It's a little complicated. I will understand with the examples, foreign key and primary key. But for now, I hope you understood the foreign key is nothing but when we are referring one table column to the another child table, it's called foreign key, parent and child. In simple other words, we wanted to store more information about this master data, but we can't store here because it will be duplicate. It will be more to keep it here. So we want to separate it and we are referring, we are referring that it belongs to the same. How do we decide the states? Why do we have so many states? Just to organize and manage people well. We have divided into cities, states. Otherwise, one country name is enough. Why do we have to divide the departments? So we organized well and we serve the population. This is what the system organized. Many different departments to serve the people. In the same way, we create many tables and we refer that this still belongs to that information, that master data. Okay, now what is check constraint? So check constraint is nothing but you wanted to store the employee's salary. Suppose, just an example, where do we apply check constraint? Can you hire an employee who works with 0 rupees or $0? No. You must have to pay that person something. It means a salary column cannot be 0. It has to be at least $10 or some more than that. But maybe more than $1. Maybe we can define, maybe more than $1,000. Now we want to set some rules. So we want to set some rules that on a column only accept the data when it's satisfied by the rule which we are telling. So if we have these kind of validation, we wanted to check the incoming value with our given rules. That particular thing is check constraint. The name itself saying check. So suppose we wanted to set $2,000. A salary should not be accepted until it's greater than $2,000. HR cannot register an employee in an employee portal until it's he or she provide the salary more than 2,000. We wanted to set some rules. So using the check constraint, if we define while creating a table, this rules, then it will reject if somebody is trying to insert using the insert command we have seen, right? We can insert the data. So it will reject. It will not accept the values. It will say, no, we can't, because the person who has created this table has set some rules in the check constraint. Okay. Now default. So what is default constraint? Default constraint is basically defining something as a fixed value. If something is not given, it means right now, suppose I am doing all business only in USA, and I have a country column, and in future I might have a plan to expand my business to in the Asia part as well. Okay. So right now I don't want that somebody should supply the value. When they send me insert command to this table, why to waste time? I know right now my business is only in USA. So in a country column, I can define this constraint and I can set USA as a default value, or maybe many other things. We can not, this is just an example. We can set default on numeric fields, decimal fields, any other things, any other characters, any other data types. Default is not specific to some data types. Default means fixing a value what we are expecting if nothing is supplied. As simple as that. So let's see. So let's see the example of employees. You can see this create table employees here, name. This is the first column, employee ID with int. Second data type, don't worry about varchar 2, just go with varchar. And here not null. So this is how we define, this is very simple. This is how we define not null. Now let's see, let's try to do the practical. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to change the name so that you guys won't get confused with the table name. I want to define this employee 1. I'm just changing the name. Okay. Selecting, creating under demo DB. You can see I have to refresh. Now you can see, I expand this. Now I expand the columns. You can see there are 3 columns: employee ID, name, which is not null, and age. Okay. I also expand the constraint folder. You don't see it here. Then you say, what is going on? Why it is not there in the constraint? Now you might thinking, why it's not there? Not null is not, has to be created separately as a part of the constraint. We'll also see that later when we create other constraints. But you might be thinking, why, if it is a constraint, why it's not coming as a part of this? It's a normal behavior, very common constraint which we can keep. Okay, now how I can test the constraint? Let's see. Insert into employees 1. I hope you remember the syntax. Values, open bracket. And I'm supplying the first value. I'm supplying the second value. And then I'm supplying the third value, which is nothing but employee ID, name, and age. Okay. I can also define all my columns here. There is no problem. If you are thinking why I didn't supply, or if I know what is my sequence of my columns, I can supply directly values using the values without defining the columns. But I have to, when I don't define these columns here, I need to make sure my sequencing is as per the table got created. The way I'm supplying the values here, it has to be as per the table got created. Then I'm obliged to follow the rules. If I have to, define, then I can change it. That we have seen in previous videos. Okay. So I'm going to insert this. There is no problem. Perfect. It's getting inserted. Now I want to supply one more. How do I copy it without selecting the column, selecting the line? Is just put the cursor in that line, put a control C, and then put a control V. It means it's without selecting also it copied that particular line. Okay, here I don't want to supply. I only want to supply employee ID and age. Okay, let's run this and let's see. This time I'm not supplying name, and for the name I'm saying not null. Let's see what it is saying. Let me enter. I hope you can read it. Cannot insert. We will also learn in one of the videos what is this different 4 types, why, what is the meaning of each and everything. But for now, let's see. Cannot insert the value null into the column name table. This, employee 1. Column does not allow nulls. Insert fails. The statement has been terminated, means SQL Server is not accepting your inserting values. Whatever values you have sent to the SQL Server, it's rejecting. Okay. Why it's rejecting? Because the person who has created the table, he has set some rules, he or she has set some rules by defining the not null constraints. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Now, let's see some other constraint. Yeah, let's see default constraint. So in salary, in this, now you are familiar with table structure, create table, table name, employee ID, all the things. Here we can say default 20,000, 20,000 we are, this is the base salary of the company. If whoever joins us, we are thinking that that person should have that much amount at least. So we are fixing it, even though we don't supply. Let's try it out. What is harm in trying out? Okay, let's see. This I'll create as a 2. Done. Oh, here there is no data type. Sorry, let me define it. Sorry, my bad. There was no data type. Sorry, there was another mistake. So I just rectify those. Okay. Now, it's the same thing. All the columns, employee ID, name, age, salary. How do I test it? Very simple. Let me at least copy some of the things here. Okay, so I can use into this. This is my table number 2, employee ID, name, age, and let me put salary here. Okay, salary. Let me put into the next line so we can see something. Okay, in the 4th value, let's say I wanted to supply something. 10,000. Okay. Now, default doesn't mean that I can't supply. Default works when I'm not providing the value, what is the fixed amount it should take. Let me show you the data of employee 2. Right? It's taking what I have given, 10,000. Now, suppose I'm not supplying the value. That's it. Okay. One row affected. Now I'm going to run it again. Now, do you see this 20,000? Because when you don't supply, the default constraint will get applied. Okay. Okay, perfect. So now we have seen, we have seen the default constraint. Now let's also see the check constraint. Check constraint, as I said, in check constraint, we can decide some rules which the person has to obey when they are sending some inserting, or they are inserting some data or sending some data. They have to follow that rule. Okay. So now here, how do we define? We are saying that, okay, that's the age column, int data type. We can simply say check. And we have to name the column again because this is against that particular column. We can say age should be greater than 15. If somebody is supplying a value less than that or 15, it should get rejected. Let me show you. Let's see. Let me make it 4. Create. Let me copy. This is our table number 4. Employee ID, name, age. Okay. Here I'm saying, let me say first 23. 23 is greater than 15? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Oh, sorry. I should selected full command. Done. So employee 4 table, does not have a problem with supplying more than 15, greater than 15. Now let me try 12 for sure. Okay, let me try. What it's saying this time? This time it's saying the insert statement conflict with the check constraints. The conflict occurred in the database table in the name column age. Now this is the information you will see. Okay, but how do you validate? Okay, now let me refresh on this side. Let me go to the employee 4 table. Let me go to the. Now do you see the constraint here in the constraint? Okay, I can generate that script also using right click and then script and this. What it is saying, it's saying age has to be greater than 15. But we know we have created this table in case you are facing that problem and you wanted to know the constraints. You can always go to the table, go to the constraint folders, and then see what's the rule. What's the rule is defined. What is the problem with your supplying values? Okay. Because here it's not show, but not null constraint, it shows here itself. So it doesn't need to be present here. And you remember we created a default constraints for employee 2. It's here, okay, for the salary column. Okay, so now we have seen check constraint also. Now unique constraint is also just like a unique. We can say not null, and unique we can say social security number. Now in the same way, it will not allow, once we inserted some value and we are trying to insert the same value again in the next row, in the next attempt, it will say this is already exist. This, you can't insert the duplicate data, duplicate values in a specific column. Once one value is set, you cannot provide the same value and try to insert. It will not accept. So that's the rule of unique constraint. Okay. Now here there is one more thing to learn is primary key. What did I say about the primary key? I hope you remember. So primary key is nothing but which is unique and not null. So when we define a primary key to something, it means it's a very important value for that particular information of that row. It may be your employee ID, it may be your account number. It is something which represents all the data, uniquely. Let's say we can say out of all the 500 employees, employee ID is the main thing to know about anything about that person. Its address, its phone number, its salary, employee ID is the main thing. So whenever we refer a main thing, main element, main value, the important, at most important value in the table, we have to refer, which is unique and not null. Now you know what is unique, now you know what is not null. That is a good candidate of primary key. So how do we choose which column we have to define a primary key? So for example, you can reference in an employee table, employee ID. In your account table of your bank account, your account number is a primary key. It cannot be duplicate. It cannot be null. Okay. So I hope you understood the primary key. So I think that's it. I think we covered. Yeah, we covered. And we can also modify tables and their constraint, but that we will learn into the different videos. Thank you.